All right. Thank you for that. And if there are no questions, we will move on to teaching and learning. Dr. Chamberlain.
Hi, everyone. Thank you. So I will begin my conversation to say that some of the data that's in this document that the chart I've shared with you is a little bit skewed, as we had a few families that answered multiple times to the survey, but basically it's on point. So you'll see that we have had a pretty good response rate, even though, again, there are a few more we need to reach out to. And this is data that we're going to be using to kind of begin to establish some classes. And as you can see, that there was a much greater percent of students, families who want their child to attend school in the hybrid model, all in the 80s or upper 70s percent of students in each school building. And a much smaller percent of students who want that remote learning model, but nonetheless, a significant number of students who will not be attending our school buildings each day. At the time I looked at this, it was about 114 students at the high school, 71 at the middle, 132 at Swanson, 41 students at Packagug, and 53 at Bryn Mawr. The busing data didn't quite give us as much of the information as we wanted as of this point. There still seemed to be a number of students where parents put in comments that they just were not sure yet if they were going to be allowing their student to ride the bus. But nonetheless, it does seem that there are a much greater percentage of students who will not be riding the bus. So this is information we're trying to gather and use for a number of reasons, right? As I mentioned a moment ago, principals are beginning to look at, how many students are they going to have in the building at any one time, and how is that staffing going to align, right, to staff who have indicated that they'll be returning to the school building versus some staff who really would rather not, are unable to due to medical reasons, and how are we going to marry those two groups of people? So that's one place where we're starting. We also have heard of late, some time ago, I think in our initial conversations, we talked about creating the cohorts and using the alphabet, right? So that siblings would be together. But it seems that there's a growing voice from the community who really are wanting that neighborhood grouping. In this survey, where folks could put responses, a number of people have already indicated, my daughter needs to be with this group and this group of students because we live in the same neighborhood, and one of the moms in the neighborhood is going to kind of provide childcare and supervision. So that's something that we're working on now to see where and what an appropriate kind of dividing line might be to create these more neighborhood cohorts, because we still want to make sure that we have balanced numbers, that cohort A and cohort B are about the same size, or it defeats the purpose of how we've kind of established this learning model. So there's a little bit more digging into this work and these numbers that we have to do for sure. But we have had a good response. If people have not yet responded and you're listening, we urge you to please do that, because we do need to hear from each and every family as far as what their decision is at this point in time. So it's a really good start. It gives us some good, a good broad sense of where we're heading, but there's still much more work that needs to be done, and more families that need to be contacted to really have an exact, complete look at this date and time of what we might be doing. So we're hearing loud and clear, though, and I actually mentioned that to Darlene Coyle, and she said she had been hearing some of that through the community as well, hoping that we were considering more of a neighborhood grouping than an alphabetical one. So we'll see if we can make that happen in a way that works.
Great. Through the chair, I just have a question about busing in general. This might be a Cecilia question, actually. In a normal year, how many, or what's the percentage of students that take the bus in general? Like, how do we compare? I can see what the survey says, but how far off is that from our normal numbers?
We usually have about 1,600 students overall that register to ride the bus for registration out of our whole district. So I'm not sure, like, I'm looking at the numbers. I don't have it in front of me right here, but
about two-thirds of our students.
Right. Yeah. And then.
But now if you look at the ones that have responded, we're maybe at 3, 5, maybe we're around 800 right now. And again, that's not everyone responding. So there's a definite decrease as of this point with the number of students that it looks like will be taking the bus.
Okay, no, that's actually good. That seems like it would work out well given the new restrictions. So, people are worried about trying to get additional buses, but if we don't need them, then that's really great.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
I mean, right now, and through the chair, right now, so we did, it says busing update underneath the teaching and learning, but
Yeah.
I ended up taking the bus meeting today with Cecilia. This was our first kind of reach out, to AA to kind of get a feel for where they were with the new busing, requirements and things like that. So I was very comfortable in terms of what their sanitation procedures were. They're looking to have hand sanitizers on buses, obviously windows open as per DESI guidance. They will be cleansing the buses between runs. They will be using static sprayers in the evenings to deep clean the buses every night. The drivers will be filling out a similar document as we'll be asking our students to do, the zip slip idea. And so they'll be maintaining vigilance, over the health of their drivers and making sure that those people on the buses, are as healthy as they can possibly be and should be. So they're monitoring that. And what we're doing right now, and this is going to just require further updating in terms of meetings with them, is, once we kind of get a handle on what we want to do, if in fact busing is, by neighborhood, if we can make that work, then it requires just going back to AA and exploring, the feasibility of that with them. We talked about it a little bit today. They had expressed just some logistical concerns about it. Not that it can't be done, but so we just kind of let that settle with them so they could think about the possibility of what that might look like. So it was a positive, positive meeting with AA, and we'll continue to dialogue with them through the month of August and September, as we start to really close in on, a school start.
Great, thank you.
Gail?
I have a question for Beth. I noticed that we have, let's say, 71 students at AMS that want to go remote. Do we have anything in place so if they change their mind, they can let us know ahead of time so they don't just show up someday and say, I'm here?
Yeah, so we have spoken about that. It seems that, so there may be some changes prior to the start of the school year, right, to this data. Some people may go through the town halls and say, you know what, I feel good about the kids being in the hybrid model now. But then after that, we are going to have a system, kind of an application to change their mode of learning that will happen around the trimester switches. So that will fit well with changes of schedule at the middle school or high school. And they're going to have to give us a little bit of notice because we still want to stand by the 6 feet distance with kids and all of that. And there may be some logistical things that need some time to take place. So there will be an application process for that. I mean, it's not, no one's going to be denied. We just need it for the warning and to be prepared for the child.
Good, thank you.
Yep.
Any other comments or questions? Seeing none. And that's all you have for us, Dr. Chamberlain?
That's it. Dr. Hanfield gave you the busing update, so I am done.
All right, excellent. I thank you both. Great reports. And now for a little pick-me-up, we move on to business and financial. Celia?
Good afternoon, everyone. I have a very short report. I provided in your packet a year-to-date budget report for fiscal year 21 dated August 7th, 2020, and I'm happy to answer any questions with regard to that. At this time, I didn't have any specific transfers, so it's just the budget year-to-date budget report. And if you have any questions or anything.
Any questions or comments? Gail?
Yeah.
Celia,
I'm sorry, Doc.
No, go ahead.
Cecilia, I just have one. It looks like we have enough money. Are we going to be able to start paying the teachers' salaries when they start working, or how's that going to happen?
Yeah, yes. I mean, we haven't, basically they're on a 26 pay cycle, so they have their pay through the summer. We just did our last summer payroll or for the summer liability. So the next payroll that will start the teachers, the IAs, the nurses, and the ABAs. They will be put into the budget, and we will be running numbers. So right now the numbers aren't encumbered for their salaries, but they will be within the next payroll period. Liz will be working on getting them all. She has them all entered and just ready to set them up and push go to get them to encumber, but their salaries will be encumbered. So we do have enough money to cover the salaries for the current staff that we have in place. So
Good. Thank you.
you're welcome.
And through the chair, but just to follow up on that real quick. So we're still awaiting final numbers from the state. But to Cecilia's point, yeah, I mean, we're fine in that respect. What we're really waiting is to get a firm handle on what the numbers are, from the state, or at least some strong projections. And then we have to sit down and with the unions and start looking at those MOAs that we had drafted back in the spring. I have a meeting with Town Manager Jacobson and CFO Kazanovich on Monday, and that's one of the topics of discussion. But we're okay.
Dot, did you have something?
Thanks. Yes, through the chair. I just had a question specific to supplies. Obviously that will probably be a little bit different this year for at least some of our buildings, maybe not for the little guys, but I was wondering when the teachers are actually going to be able to submit for any expenses that they may have, or how it's going to look different this year. Do you have any, and how that impacts the budget? So.
Yeah, so basically what we did at the start of the fiscal year is we said to building principals that we really wanted to hold off on any supply purchases unless they were absolutely, not that these aren't, but unless they were absolutely mission critical to, starting the school year. So some of those things have been ordered, but we did ask that they leave about 30% of their budget lines free in the event that, we get a catastrophic budget number, that it gives us another avenue, potentially to utilize in terms of closing the gap. Those orders have gone out for the things that they've identified as mission critical to start the school year. Certainly if there's a cost incurred, by any of our teachers for anything, I'm hoping that would have been, as it should be, approved through the building principal. And then we would see those returns here, and then we would be able to get back any monies owed to any teachers for anything.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, any other questions or?
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, I think that's it.
Thank you.
Thank you for
very
that report. And we now move on to policies.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So somewhat quickly, I don't know how quickly, but last week I had brought forward suggested policy recommendation from Mass Association of Superintendents and Mass Association of School Committees relative to school committee understanding the unique nature of the times that we're in, and that it just clearly delineating out what the superintendent may need to do with school committee consent. I had indicated last week that I wasn't really feeling strongly about it one way or the other. It would be an interim policy, if anything. But as I read through the policy, and certainly, the committee can weigh in on this, but as I read the policy, there was nothing that jumped out at me that would allow me to do anything different than what we're doing here as a group. So my feeling is that I'm not necessarily certain that it needs to be adopted, but that certainly is up to the committee to discuss.
Any comments or questions? I would just say that I could go either way. We certainly could adopt the policy, as you said, in the interim. And hopefully when this is over in the near future, we could scrap that policy. So that's my opinion. Any other comments?
Through the chair, I actually just had one question, and I may have misread this in our return to school policy. I thought that we were actually also requiring face masks for our pre-K, like pre-K to 2 kids, and I only know because it's different than in this policy.
So through the chair, that's going to be, so that's a second policy that we'll take up after this one. And you're right.
Oh, did I miss that? Sorry.
No, that's okay. That the face coverings policy is on first read today. So what we would be doing is taking that policy when we get to it, and we would be making those adjustments, because you're correct. PK to 1 isn't mentioned there, but it needs to be based on what we're doing here in our district. But yeah, that's next policy. But you're absolutely right.
Okay, thanks.
Sure.
So is this a policy that we want to adopt?
I mean, there's no harm in adopting it. There's no harm in adopting it. I guess when I look at it, I just, it was crafted originally. I think the intent of it was crafted for, as I said last week, school districts where there was some friction between, superintendent, school committee roles, who's making those decisions, things like that. I think that was that definitely was the intent of this, and for committees to recognize that due to the nature of things that are going on at such a rapid clip, that superintendents have to be empowered, to make decisions on the fly, outside the scope perhaps of a school committee meeting or a school committee vote of affirmation. I mean, like I said, there's no, like you said, Mr. Chair, there is no issue with adopting it. I personally don't feel that, that's a circumstance that I'm living in right now with you folks. Certainly, we could adopt it, as you said, and scrap it later too. I mean, I could go either way with it.
Here, I don't think we need it, but my only thought is
Here we go again.
Do we lose you, George? We can't hear you, Mag, if you're talking.
I thought, can you hear me now?
George is back. He just started back again. His head Bob started again, so George is back.
Because we need to post our school committee meetings, is it 48, 72 hours ahead of time? If there is a decision that has to be made that quickly, would this kind of cover us in that, is my question.
If there was a decision that needed to be made that was of such urgency that I would require or I would want the committee's input, we would post for an emergency meeting. That's how we would handle it. This policy would, as it's written, would preclude that from having to happen, based on the nature and severity of whatever the issue is. That's why I kind of feel like we're going to be we would be talking about these things anyway. And it would be, my recommendation to the committee, whatever, just in the face of being totally transparent with the committee, but also with the public. So, again, I leave it up to you. I can go either way, but.
Let's,
Through the chair, I don't think we need it personally, but that's just.
okay, are there any concerns with us dismissing this policy and moving on to the next policy? Seeing none. Okay, we will move on to the EBCFA face coverings on first reading.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So as I said last week, I had told you that there would be a face covering policy coming forward. Are you out again? I apologize. Elaine was in, now she's out again. So while I'm letting her back in, I had let you know that last week we'd be bringing forward a face covering policy on suggestion from MASC. As as Dr. McCrillis had noted to me earlier, and Ms. Kaufman had also noted, it is missing a few pieces relative to what we're expecting here in Auburn as it relates to face coverings for our kids in PK in grades 1. So I would say that overall, I feel the policy is fine the way that it's written, but that we would want to make the amendment to include PK and 1 masks.
I would entertain that motion. I would entertain that motion. Go ahead, Meg.
Face coverings as presented by the MASC with the amendment to require masks for pre-K, kindergarten, and grade 1 on first read.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? Questions, comments? Roll call vote. Mrs. Holloway,
Yes.
Mrs. Harrington,
Yes.
Dr. McCrillis,
Yes.
Mrs. Kaufman,
Yes.
and Mr. Scobie, yes, it is a vote. And is that all we have before we entertain a motion for executive session? Yes,
So I have
okay. I would entertain that motion for executive session.
I will make the motion to go into executive session per Mass General Law, Chapter 30, Section 21A2, to conduct strategies for negotiations with union and non-union personnel, namely staff leave requests due to the pandemic.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Roll call vote. Mrs. Holloway,
Yes.
Mrs. Harrington,
Yes.
Dr. McCrillis,
Yes.
Mrs. Kaufman,
Yes.
and Mr. Scobie, yes. It is a vote. Good afternoon, everyone.